Yeah, I'm calling this Reconnecting Orange County to Benefit Wildlife and People, really enhancing connectivity. And I'll get a little more into the detail of that. On the right-hand side here, you can see the outline of Black Rock Forest. It's a 4,000 acre area, almost all in the Moodna watershed. If you're not familiar with our organization, we run it as a research and education forest. And we're interested in things that happen not just in the forest, but really regionally, nationally, and globally as well. And therefore comes our interest in connectivity across our landscape. I'll show a little more about where Black Rock Forest lies within the Moodna watershed shortly. But connectivity is something like a movement, I think, that's happening in a lot of places. Has been underappreciated in the past. We've established some barriers to connectivity, and kind of overcoming those barriers in our area is going to be the focus of my talk today. Connectivity across the landscape ensures ecosystem sustainability over time. So that's a goal I think that we all share. The ability of animals to move freely across our landscape is critical to their survival. They need to breed, they need to interchange genes, they need to get from winter range to summer range, etc. And it's been shown very clearly that when you fragment landscapes, you lose species over time. That's a process that's probably underappreciated, but probably still occurring on our landscape right now. Globally, habitat fragmentation is the major barrier to animal movements and threat to global biodiversity. But restoring landscape connectivity, the ability of wildlife to move across landscapes, can mitigate fragmentation. So this is typically considered establishing new corridors across the landscape to connect areas, particularly important for areas of prime habitat, core ecological integrity areas. And the science of this has advanced a lot in the last several decades. Well, who's it matter for? Here's 41 species that we've been tracking at Black Rock Forest for over a decade now, which we're concerned about. Right? They're here on the landscape, but are they really going to be here in future generations? Their numbers in general are small enough that we've got some concern about that. So do you want a future that's got river otters in it? Do you want a future that's got wood turtles or wood frogs or warblers, thrushes, brook trout, etc.? All these are kind of marginal species in our landscape right now. And many of them are state listed as threatened or endangered or of special concern. So this is the biological kind of perspective. Why connectivity is important: because these organisms need it to survive over the long run. We're particularly interested in carnivores. They play critical roles in our ecosystem that are often underappreciated. And we saw what happened when we extirpated carnivores across most of our landscape. Herbivore populations, things like deer and mice, just expanded exponentially, causing their own problems. You know, we hit them with our cars and they spread Lyme disease. But carnivores help provide top-down control on herbivore populations, and thus they're really important. And they've been increasing recently. And here in Black Rock Forest, our deer population is now down to about 14 per square mile, which we find to be a sustainable level. We've got tree regeneration happening again. And the deer are healthier, their weights are going up over time. And we know that part of it is due to the increased populations of our carnivores. We had one study finished up a year ago of coyote scat, and they found 70% of coyote scat had identifiable deer hair or bone fragments in it. So, bears, bobcats, they don't take a lot of deer, but all together, all three populations have been increasing over time, and we think are helping to bring our herbivore populations down to a healthier level. People need connectivity too. And so our walkable communities, which has been a great idea, and complete streets that include recreational opportunities, thinking about bikes and joggers and cross-country skiers, ideally should seamlessly connect with recreational opportunity networks across our landscape, because these also attract tourism for economic growth, while improving health and quality of life for residents. So what's pictured here is the so-called Highlands West Regional Trail Network Plan, as envisioned by the New York, New Jersey Trail Conference and the Open Space Institute. It links together things like the Appalachian Trail and the Long Path and the Highlands Trail, which cuts across our region here, and others. And the goal is to ideally connect these over time to form a really robust regional recreational network, which I think would really benefit all of our communities. I just showed the location of Black Rock Forest in it here, so you can see where some of these long-term trails, the Highlands Trail is a plan to go right across Black Rock Forest. Schuster Mountain State Park is over here as well. And so again, I'll show more about where these fit into the regional picture as I go on. But keep in mind these two areas in particular, because this is where I'm going to be focusing primarily on the connectivity issue. But again, this is not just about wildlife, but about connecting people too. This map I got from the 2019 comprehensive plan for Orange County, which is wonderful. Kelly, thank you for sharing this with me. And it shows the planned priority growth areas for our county, which are sensibly located in areas that are already developed and have got infrastructure to allow additional future development. What we need to keep in mind as time goes on, though, is to not let these priority growth areas create further barriers to connectivity, whether it's ecological connectivity or people connectivity, because that's important. And you know what happened was, as our major highway networks in particular, like the Thruway, I-87 and 84, went into the landscape, they failed to mitigate for the effect on connectivity. You can't walk across the Thruway. You can't even cross in very many places. Same with I-84. And animals can't do it safely either. And when they do try to, all too often we run them over or hit them with our cars. So, you know, we need growth in our area, but this should be done in a way that is sensitive to the needs of connectivity for both our wildlife sustainability and for people. Again, here we're seeing within Orange County there where Black Rock Forest is and Schuster to the left. And you see they are on either sides of the Thruway and have been since it was put in 65 years ago. So as I said, our wildlife can cause us trouble when they try to cross our roads, particularly the larger animals. We just had a bear here hit on Route 9W 2 weeks ago. You know, when you hit a deer, hopefully, you know, you or your family members are safe, but not necessarily. These collisions are really a problem and are part of the reason why we really need to mitigate the lack of connectivity. Wildlife vehicle collisions cause about 200 deaths and 26,000 injuries a year in the US. And the average cost, when you average everything out, is about $6,600 per deer collision. So there's a huge amount of money spent every year because of this. And so the question is, how can we get wildlife off of our roads and our highways? Well, we need better passageways, and in most cases, that's going to involve passageways under the highways. So culverts, you know, designed to draw water from one side of a roadway to another are one possible solution here, but very few of them historically were designed for use by wildlife. But there's much better designs for culverts out there right now. In general, they need to be bigger, higher, depending on the height of the organism that you're trying to allow to travel safely through, and wider as well. And the bigger they are in general, the better daylit they are, the better connected they are with natural habitat on both sides, the more likely animals are to use them. Just up in the Adirondacks, work with the Nature Conservancy, and there they've been partnering with New York State DOT to replace problematic culverts in many areas with either better culverts or bridges. So this is a tributary of the Osable River up there, a beautiful trout stream river, and a successful example where they had flooding before and road washouts. And by working together, they did this terrific design here, where you've got an arch instead of a culvert. It's not likely to clog and cause flooding problems anymore. It's big enough to calculate to let the water flow volumes get through, but it's also got a terrestrial component on both sides that other semi-aquatic organisms or even terrestrial organisms can use, again, to pass safely underneath the road. So there's these great new designs out there. They're becoming more affordable over time. And it's terrific to see our DOT, our state DOT, participating and learning about this. Here's an example of a landscape bridge or a wildlife overpass. So not all organisms will use underpasses. Many of them are just too skittish to do it. It depends on the design in some cases. But wildlife overpasses, where they have been constructed, have been especially successful. And I toured this one in Belgium summer before last. And it went in 2006, I think, cost about $4.5 million, but it links together two key Belgian wildlife areas. And the evidence shows that it is being used extensively by wildlife. All the target species, they actually have got ponds integrated into it, so they've got amphibian movement over time across it, mammals, et cetera. And it's a terrific example. And this kind of beveled design, I actually think, would fit very nicely crossing our New York State Thruway if we could get it done. You may know that Banff, Canada is the first and really the foremost example of wildlife crossings, successful construction of wildlife crossings in the world, and has been since the 1990s. So they've learned a tremendous about how to do it over time, and are really, in terms of the engineering and design, it's the place we should all look to. There are a number of accidents, particularly with large animals. They've got moose up there, they've got bear up there, and elk, and those accidents were just horrifying consequences. The numbers have gone down drastically. And it also creates a real kind of tourist buzz to have this in the area. You can see the wildlife better. People can appreciate and understand how creating connectivity mitigates barriers over time. And the area is a real tourist draw. Incredibly, now I believe they've got 6 overpasses and 30 reconstructed underpasses, and it's working tremendously well. And I've spoken with the engineers who are building these things, and they've got a lot of things about design that they've learned how to do it efficiently and cost effectively. So depending on the design of the crossing structure, these can be built to integrate human use as well, which, as I said, is really one of our goals and needs to be one of our goals around the region. You can have overuse by people that can reduce the amount of wildlife, so you have to be very careful the way you integrate human use into these crossing structures. But they've been designed and implemented successfully around the world, both overpasses and underpasses. So how about, where's all this sit in the Moodna watershed here? I've got the map. You can see Black Rock Forest kind of on the right. It's about 6 square miles in total size, so fairly large core habitat area, almost all in the Moodna watershed. And just to the west is the Schuster Mountain area, which is about 10 square miles, really kind of central to our entire Moodna watershed. You can see it from just about everywhere. And as I think many of you know, just a spectacular natural area, a wonderful natural area. But it's disconnected from the rest of the highlands, and that's a concern then about it becoming an island, fragmentation, causing it to lose species and ecological integrity over time. So as I said before, habitat fragmentation threatens the integrity of our region. And in this particular area, numerous studies have shown that this is a really ecologically valuable area. So we'd be doing a real disservice if we continue to lose species and integrity. On the right-hand side here, We've got a map done by the Nature Conservancy. They actually looked at resilience of the landscape. What areas are going to be able to retain species the longest over time in the face of climate change? And this area between Black Rock Forest and Scunnamunk and the northern part of West Point score very high for resilience. So it indicates that these are prime habitat areas, and the fact that they've been mostly preserved is a really good thing in terms of retaining species. But species will need to move over time. They'll need to find these paths across the landscape. And this is a study by New York Natural Heritage that tracks 17 different species and their ability to respond to climate change by moving over time. And they modeled with path analysis where these organisms would need to go to be able to migrate to better territory over time. And in fact, a lot of them, the model didn't take into account the effect that the Thruway has as a barrier to dispersal. And then recently, Audubon New York designated this entire region from Storm King, Black Rock Forest, over to Woodcock Mountain and Scunnamunk as an important bird area. And of course, birds can migrate across the Thruway, but it still adds to the evidence for the ecological value of this area. So we've been working for a number of years. I just checked 5 years ago, I gave a kind of similar talk, I think, to this same group. Always interested in the ecology of Black Rock Forest and the surrounding region and how it connects and where organisms can connect and disperse over time. So in this photo, you can see the Black Rock Forest, the Highlands area over here. We're directly contiguous with West Point, which has also got tremendous natural resources. And this is the valley of the Woodbury Creek here, which parallels the Thruway. That essentially is a barrier to moving across here over to Scunnamunk Mountain on the left. So for our project here, we've been studying different organisms, where their distributions are. They're moving across the landscape. And just over 2 years ago, we hired a terrific wildlife biologist as a full-time member of our staff, Scott LaPointe. And he's a particular expert on carnivores and in use of camera trapping and computer modeling on the landscape, and has put out camera trap arrays across from Scunnamunk through Legacy Ridge area, Black Rock Forest, and Storm King Mountain, and has got over 500,000 wildlife images over this time so far, including 14 detections of fishers. So that's a wonderful carnivorous mammal that's just moving back into our area, and 123 images of bobcats to date. But they are not randomly distributed across the landscape. In fact, the only fishers were found over here on Scunnamunk Mountain. They don't seem to be successfully migrating across 87. In fact, 84 looks like a barrier to dispersal as well. Bobcats, especially numerous in Black Rock Forest and the surrounding area, really doing quite well. I've been here for 28 years, I've never seen one. But you put the cameras out there and you find out they're actually quite abundant. You know, they're one of our top carnivores, top predators. They're just very, very wary of humans. A wonderful native species, I think an icon of our region. And the fact that we've still got them is a testament to the health of our region ecologically, but almost none on Scunnamunk Mountain. They just don't like to traverse across. And interestingly, over on Storm King, even though Scott's placed a lot of cameras over here, hasn't found any fishers, and either none or very few bobcats. And you might know that Route 9W going over the mountain has got a concrete barrier down the median the entire way. And that's a tough barrier to organisms to disperse across. And we've had otters killed trying to cross. And then down in here just 2 weeks ago, a bear. So a very sad situation. So the evidence is good that these highways are creating barriers, serious barriers to connectivity. Scott last year was able to collar for the first time, put a temporary radio collar on a female bobcat captured in Black Rock Forest. And this cool image is all the various locations that over a period of many months she visited and went to. And you don't have to analyze it very deeply to see that she really avoids roads. Bobcats, particularly busy roads, just don't go near them. Here's Route 6, highly trafficked. Not once in the entire time did she even try to cross Route 6. Here's the Thruway over here, 32 she hasn't crossed, even Mineral Springs Road. She has crossed Route 293, which is lower traffic volume, but when you zoom in, you see there's really only 2 pinch points, well, maybe 3, that she's found safe to cross. So this is her entire range, and she very seldom and very carefully crosses 293. So in general, for important carnivores like bobcats, our highways, particularly the ones that are really well traveled, are serious barriers to movement and dispersal. So, what are the structures that do cross our highways right now, and how are they used by wildlife is something that's been of increasing interest to us. And so we've surveyed all the culverts and bridges across I-87, working with the Thruway Authority. We have a permit to do this. We're just winding up extensive camera trapping at both sides of these, primarily culverts that go across the Thruway. We've also done measurements all along Route 32, Mineral Springs Road, and have done some on Route 9W as well. We're trying to rate these things for both their physical condition and their ability to allow for wildlife movement. So Scott's got the data with camera traps, but New York State, actually New England, has got a protocol now for rating these things for aquatic connectivity. Things like drop-offs will prevent fish from being able to use them, for example. And also terrestrial criteria are being developed. And so we're getting trained by DEC in how to rate these things and enter the ratings into the statewide database. And in general, for the most part, what we're finding is they get water from one side of the highway to the other okay. A couple of them are actually failing. And that provides the best opportunity potentially for replacing them with more wildlife-friendly culverts. But really the use, particularly under the Thruway, very little wildlife use of any of these. They were designed for water, not for wildlife. And probably more ATVs going through the bigger ones than wildlife, which also can make animals shy away. So in terms of where do we go from here, reconnecting our landscape, trying to figure out where crossing structures can be placed, should be placed, how what we've got can be modified. The background steps to understand this are kind of bolded here, which we've been working on, documenting the detailed needs for enhanced connectivity, which species need it, which ones are really obstructed by these barriers, stating clearly the objectives, and primarily they're to get wildlife off of our roadways, so for their benefit and ours, also to figure human connectivity into this. Assessing locations for crossing structures and designs. I'm happy just this fall we started working with the West Point Civil Engineering Department, and they've got 3 cadets that are working on a set of designs for a overpass suitable for the species that we're interested in, overseen by 2 West Point faculty members. So we're very optimistic. This is the first time we've really kind of looked at designs and look forward to seeing the products they're going to come up with, which should be coming in December, I believe. Cost estimation, we're not quite there yet. Identifying funding sources. I'm happy to say Scott and I attended a conference, the Northeastern Transportation and Wildlife Conference, a couple of weeks ago. And funding is there at the federal level. So, when you're talking interstate like I-87, the FAST Act has been renewed through next year at least. It's got billions of dollars in it. The money flows from the federal government to states for important projects like this. So that's, happy to say there are potential funding sources. Interestingly, particularly if you can reduce flooding, reestablish aquatic connectivity with structures that reduce funding. The new wording in the laws, these are called protective structures or protective enhancements, something like that. Replacing culverts with bridges is kind of like state of the art right now. that gives you both reduction in flooding and enhanced connectivity for wildlife. And then project team, we're working with a number of people and organizations, and happy to have anybody here in this group that's interested join us in any way that we can. Eventually, we'll hopefully get to actual implementation, which will require permitting, construction as needed. And then we really need to manage and evaluate crossing structures properly over time. We don't just put them in. This needs to be done scientifically. Propose a hypothesis, design a structure to try to meet the need, and then track that over time to see how well it really does reestablish wildlife or human connectivity. And communication of results is critical so that people understand the good that comes from projects like this. Here's a kind of core team: Black Rock Forest, Open Space Institute, very interested in this, and New York State Parks is interested as well, right up to the level of the Parks Commissioner, Eric Kulisade, who's visited and is in favor of this. New York, New Jersey Trail Conference, particularly from the human crossing, but they understand the need to balance humans with wildlife so that we don't drive them off. Storm King Art Center, that owns some of the property in here, fully on board, and U.S. Military Academy at West Point and the Orange County Land Trust. So the details then of what do you build, where do you build it? Is it a retrofit or something new? We've already been analyzing this region: property ownership, land use, protection status, topography, and the West Point engineers are looking at, especially right now, appropriate habitat, so that you're linking forest with forest or stream with stream, connecting the proper types of habitat on both sides, understanding the wildlife distributions with both camera trapping and radio collaring, documenting their movement, etc. And then roadkill wildlife vehicle collision data. Unfortunately, it's really poor. Most of our road crews, even DOT and the Thruway Authority, don't keep a lot of detailed documentation unless it's a reportable collision and insurance companies are involved there, etc. So we've got some of those data. We're analyzing them. It'd be nice to try to upgrade how those data are recorded, both type of accident and location. I mean, even a small animal running across the highway can cause a person to hit their brakes, slide and crash, cause an accident, and might never be reported as a wildlife related accident. And then genetic relatedness, we hope to be able to get a grant to study some of these species on either side of these highways and quantify exactly how much these barriers over the last 6 or 7 decades have taken the populations out of interbreeding status. So what are the options here now, and what might this look like over time? We absolutely need to look at costs, decide sensible locations. You don't want to do something like this improperly. And in some cases, it'll be retrofitting existing structures. In other cases, it would be designs for new structures. So just looking at this 3-mile section of Interstate 87 here, the Thruway, with Schuster Mountain on the left, and then the Black Rock Forest and other protected lands on the right-hand side here. What might this look like? Well, Dark Hollow Brook comes off, drains about 1,000 acres or more of Schuster Mountain, and comes under the highway right about here. It'd be a great place to replace the culverts with a bridge, something that allows for aquatic connectivity. We rated the existing culverts there right now as 0.0 for aquatic connectivity, and we had our DEC rep with us to do the scoring. But this should also be able to allow then for human passage. Getting through here, you could have a new parking area for hikers to go either east or west, connect over with Schuster Mountain. It would take some of the pressure off the other few hiking locations for Schuster Mountain. And you should be able to do an appropriate design that would allow for both human and aquatic passage at a location there like Dark Hollow Brook. It would also involve ideally daylighting about 600-foot section of the brook that is right now just a 5-foot diameter culvert. So we're talking aquatic restoration here, but also probably balancing it with human passage. And then ideally an overpass. As I said, not all organisms will use underpasses. We think we've got terrific location for an overpass. We'll see what the West Point engineers end up saying. Like I said, that Belgian design looks pretty good for here, but again, engineering design is not my forte. But it's been shown that the combination of overpasses and underpasses is the most effective way to really reestablish connectivity. And then in between, the other culverts there can almost certainly be increased in size, or shelves, critter shelves attached to them, so that you would end up there with over a couple of miles section here, a lot of ways to overcome the barrier and allow wildlife and people to go from one side to the other. All right, what are the costs? I always get asked this. New York State, they'll probably be pretty high. Banff, I think they've been averaging about $4 million per structure. The Belgian one that I showed, about 4.4 million, but that was back in 2006. In Seattle, Washington, they've just built one recently for 6.2 million. These are pretty much all overpass costs. But here in Wyoming, they did 6 underpasses and 2 overpasses for 10 million. In Nevada, across I-80, 2 overpasses and fencing plus 6, I guess they were pre-existing underpasses were modified for a total of $18 million. So these are big projects. You don't want to take them lightly, but the costs are not, phenomenal. And I think the benefits over time really add up. And you can do it cost effectively. So some lessons learned in construction of advanced structures to reduce costs. 40-meter width, you don't really need much wider than that for most species. Precast sections, beveled slopes, reduced fill depth, all these different details that are out there for how to make a project like this reasonably cost effective. And then there's the education component, which I think could be just great for Orange County, for the Moodna watershed and the surrounding area. The New York State Thruway is one of the busiest highways in America. We tried to do some, Katie Terlizzi, who I think is on the call, tried to analyze the data. It's pretty complicated. But if the numbers we've got are right, it's about 18 million vehicle passes per year along the Thruway. Imagine having a beautiful structure with images of the wildlife that are safely passing across it on both sides, and then interpretive features at the Sloatsburg and up at the to the north, the Thruway rest areas. You can do a tremendous job of public education about nature, wildlife, sustainability, highway safety, etc. So because this really is kind of a paradigm shift that's happening at this point in time, and it's a movement, to my mind, it's just a matter of time until the first really model connectivity features are built across New York State highways. And we say, why not in Orange County's Moodna watershed? I think it can be a terrific integration of planning for both open space, parks, wildlife and recreation with economic development and transportation. So we hope that you folks will be supportive. We'd love partners. If there's ways that you'd like to contribute to this, I think it'd be good for municipalities all around our watershed. And at this point, that's all I have, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Bill. Any questions for Bill? Pretty comprehensive presentation. Really enjoyed the information you gave us about the costs, but also the locations, and that GPS tracking of the female bobcat, as I recall, was really interesting. Who knew that they traveled so much? I guess they're always on the prowl, so to speak. Any other thoughts from anyone?
No, I'll just say thank you, Bill. That's really nice. I enjoyed all the images that you were able to incorporate. And it is something, Jay, that we should every once in a while put on our agenda.
For sure, for sure. I think, Bill, we'll be in contact and let's see what we can do to help you. Right now, we're pretty meager on funding, but we have a lot of enthusiastic members. So maybe we can make up the funding lack with enthusiasm.
Yeah, I just chime in since I want to also recap and thank Bill and BlackRock. As you mentioned, Bill, at the beginning, the Black Rock Forest has been a partner for the Moodna Watershed Council since before we were formed. Some of the earliest small meetings that included Kate, who's on the call today, and me, and Jay, and Bill sometimes were held at the Forest Science Center, and you've been supportive all along the way, letting me plan meetings there, and the monitoring workshop we did, all sorts of stuff. And I thought that this project that has been years in the making already, this connectivity project, could be something our council really gets behind and makes, I think we could be a useful partner, and it's a signature thing. It's very exciting. It's a big deal. So I'm really glad we got to hear more about it today, and I hope we can pitch in and make it help make it happen.
Well, thank you. We welcome any help we can get, and we love our watershed, so that's why we've been there with you guys from the beginning.
This is Tom Bregman from the Nature Museum. I'd just like to pipe in and say that from an educational standpoint for a local institution, environmental education institution, we would love to be supportive and involved from the aspect of how this might support our programming and the constituents that we serve. So highly supportive, and would be engaged at whatever level we had the capacity to be engaged.
Thank you, Tom.
Other thoughts, comments, questions? Simon, or you just, okay. Okay, I think that is the end of the presentation. Seeing no more comments or questions, I'll adjourn the meeting and remind you that our next council meeting is January 28th, 2021. Hopefully, well, I'm pretty sure it'll still be virtual. I can't imagine there'll be a vaccine and everybody will have it by that time. Also, our next Science and Outreach meeting, also virtual, will be on November 13th at 10:30, I believe. Yes. You're also welcome to join that. That's where a little more work gets done than our council meetings. Again, thank you to Emily Vale for helping us host this Zoom meeting. Thank you to Bill for the presentation. Thank you for all for joining us. And we'll see you in 3 months.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Bye-bye.
Thanks all. Take
Thanks.
care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.